So this nexus of water, energy and food is an issue that has become a very interesting and challenging agenda of global policy these days. Very recently, this has become a global debate as well as governance issues and also a global research agenda which comes across the continents and across countries. And we're here to discuss in the context of Mekong and ASEAN. First question that I should like to ask, may I relate this to Deepak, who has a long experience but also very engaging role in this nexus. What is it that this nexus and why it has become so important these days?
There are three problems why this nexus comes up. First of all is what I choose to call entwined predicaments. What it means is that these sectors, energy, water, food, they are running into each other's limits. When water ran into water limits, you had clever water engineers who can do all kinds of things to get you water. When you have energy limits, you have energy experts who can produce energy from the sun, from nuclear, from biofuels and biogas and all. The trouble is, even if you have the technology in energy, if you don't have the water, like South California could not build a thermal power station. And California has money, it has got technology, it has got everything. But they could not build a 3,000 megawatt power station because there was no water to cool. Just no water available. So that is the kind of limit that each sector is running into, and this is a new phenomenon that development is facing. So this is this entwined predicament that we are having to face. The second problem is, what is the nexus and what is the opposite of nexus? Nexus, we are trying to say these sectors are linked and we should talk about them and manage them together, their entwined predicament. The opposite is silo, like the grain silo. You have experts working very, very much on narrow issues in each silo. Energy people are working in energy, water people on water, food people in food, and they're not talking to each other. The problem of silo comes from what I call the problem of level. At the level of a family, everything is nexused. As a family, you have to talk about water, energy, food at once, or you don't survive as a family. The moment you go to higher levels of organization, from family to villages and from villages to state, nation state to global, you start getting siloization going on, And that's where the problem happens, that one sector creates problem for another sector, And the question is, how do you solve it?
Now, you see, you already get why water, food and energy could be seen as a nexus because it is often seen so unrelated in terms of, say, policy making, so specialized. But Deepak did mention that we are now incapable of dealing with them in a meaningful way or in terms of policy. So may I ask what Ajahn Chirakorn think about this?
In the lower Mekong River, in the GMS, in the ASEANs, which ecological economic growth or economic growth paradigm has been dictated our region or the economic or the development of our society. When it's come to that paradigms on the economic development, it's become very obvious that the energy agenda, the water agenda as a commodity, are at the highest level because it's related to the national security. The water security has been mentioned together with the dam or water infrastructure development in everywhere. At the Basin Development Plan of the MRC, at each the EIA or all sort of project which has been implemented on the mainstream Mekong River. Yes, food security has been mentioned, but then the food security has been mentioned as a conflict or on the other side or the impact that might happen after this infrastructure development. But then when it's come to the energy, energy is also coming on at the highest level. Both of those securities are stand alone. They never integrated to each other. It is the problem. And the problem is if you look at different angles, if you look at the sustainable development integrated between ecological perspective, economic perspective, and social perspective, it's failed badly. But then when it's come to this nexus of water security, or food security, as well as security, it's very good academic exercise. But when you transverse from those academic exercise into policy in principle and policy in practice, I doubt it.
The real world is very problematic and a lot of failures from Ajahn Chirakorn. But the discussion, so now still you see I would like to follow this to Kun Suparak or
I first heard about the nexus and the water, food, energy concept around year 2010, I think. And it came to my mind. I think that was the very beginning period of the concept has been introduced until now. So there come up a lot of papers, mainly from academics, that are trying to tell what it means. So, but until this day, so I still have some doubts. So I'm still very skeptic on the concept. So I have several questions initially, just for this lot of my time. So the very strong doubt in the beginning was, why do we have to reinvent the wheel of knowledge, right? We have spent almost 4 decades been promote talking and dialogue and research about biodiversity, species and livelihood conservation, right? And spent more than 2 decades in integrated water resources management, trying to find out what it was exactly and try to test it in all levels. And now we jump to climate change in the last decade. And I think we haven't concluded yet that these 3 main concepts have achieved or not. What are the key lessons learned, or make a judgment whether we should achieve the focus or an entry point. Now we come to the nexus, water, food, and energy. And in my experience, I've been in this mission for almost 20 years, and I attended hundreds of international, regional, and national forums talking about this kind of concept. And it's going to go, the discussion will go round and round and round for years until we find a new concept to talk about.
I thought I'd start, as Ajahn Chirakorn was pointing out, about sort of fragmentations or a lack of integration, the lack of considering transboundary impacts. It made me think about, are there any fundamentals of integration or fundamentals of unintegration or disintegration? I think there are some fundamentals of integration that we cannot ignore. One is the fact already mentioned that water flows across borders. If we're talking about transboundary rivers, like the Mekong, the Salween, the Red River, and the tributaries, the Mekong has tributaries like the Sesan and the Shrey Pok and the Sekong and so on. In other words, the ecosystem has to be integrated to be viable. Fragmentation of that ecosystem undermines the ability for it to survive. But then also it seems, maybe reflecting on what Jonathan was saying this morning, that finance flows very readily across borders now. It seems that the integration of the economic system within the region is also very integrated. On the other hand, there are some fundamentals of unintegration, not disintegration, but unintegration. One thing is an observation that I will come back to in a paper I present this afternoon. The load centers, where electricity, for example, is most in demand, does not often lie in the basins where hydropower production is being targeted. So the largest power centers in this region, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Bangkok, they are not in the Mekong Basin. And yet much of the power production to be planned to be produced in the Mekong Basin will be sent to large load centers outside of it. It's a fundamental disintegration between the unit of the basin and the economic system. And the second thing, coming back to what I was mentioning about justice systems are really not integrated. We have money flowing across borders, but responsibility does not easily flow across borders. Again and again, you come across this issue of national jurisdiction. So you depend upon your national law, even if foreign direct investment is causing problems, and then maybe access to justice in another country from the origin of that finance. And yet it's very difficult to seek justice in another country because of this idea of jurisdiction. On the other hand, we organized a conference at Chula last week that shows that this system is changing. What are called extraterritorial obligations or justice mechanisms across borders are beginning to emerge, whether it's the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights or the Thai National Human Rights Commission looking at projects in neighboring countries. These are interesting changes, so maybe unconventional nexuses are emerging.
So the first point I would like to make relating to the nexus is this idea of trade-off. I think that the concept of trade-off is really central to the idea of the nexus, and in some ways one has to question where is this idea coming from. And I think as some of the previous speakers mentioned, this idea of limits of resources and scarcity are really omnipresent behind this idea of the nexus. And one has to ask ourselves in some ways to go back to the origins of the concept, which were essentially coined after basically the food and energy crisis. But what we were watching essentially in our different case study was a different type of trade-off. And then I'll bounce back on Carl's point, essentially on the idea of scale. Because in some ways what you can see is rather than about macro scarcity concern between food as in a large irrigation project versus energy essentially in a form of hydro project, what you can see is mostly a trade-off between food or energy concern on the one hand and probably more local livelihood and environmental concern on the other. So I think it's really important in some ways to reframe what we mean by the nexus. And I think that if we have a more local understanding of the nexus, with a different type of trade-off rather than food and energy, but by having a different framing of the nexus with other dimensions, including livelihood and environmental concerns, I think that would be an important way forward in framing these discussions around the concept of nexus.
Trade-off and this whole idea of nexus, there's some problem there. Because, trade-off, between you and me, I have too much of this and you have too much of that, and I need some of that and you need some of this. We can do a trade-off, okay? And that occurs quite simply in economics. But when you have institutions, whether they are at the level of nation states or whether they are at the level of particular organizations, water organizations, food organizations, energy organizations, and the trade-off becomes very complicated because these organizations are not, they're in the business of guarding their turf. They're in the business of protecting their turf and expanding their turf, if anything, This is where trade-off between agencies, between sectors, agencies that manage sectors, become extremely problematic. And the safest option for them so far has been just ignore it. Don't bother. There may be nice policies around to talk of nexus and integrated management. Now, integrated, one of the issues that I have been wrestling with is Nexus just a newfangled new brand name for integrated? Because we saw a lot of integrated development in the 70s and the 80s. And if you look at the 70s and 80s, it's a graveyard of integrated development. We have enough tombstones around, everywhere in the world, in my own country included. Beginning mid-1980s, there was fatalism in development, where it was not to develop, it was to protect the developer. And as a result, we ended up with a very desolate development landscape. And in this landscape now, we are trying to introduce, as Supanek has so bluntly put it with very good debate, is it just a new brand name we are inventing? Or is it genuinely an attempt to try to, do integration in a much better way?
I think at the priority, should we come and revisit the terms security, right? What do they mean exactly, right? Do they mean security or production, right? For me, security, it means if you talk about water, food, and nature security, it should mean that everyone should live with a secure food, to have the food that comes into their stomach to feed the family, no matter how cost it is. Same as water and energy. But production is for sale, mainly in the sense of selling it, right? But from review of the policy paper, it has convinced me that this kind of crisis, water and food and energy crisis, is coming closer or had happened already, and that encourage the mass production of food, of energy, and even mass production of water by perhaps building more reservoirs. And if we don't question it, we're going to be on the risk of backing up the corporate firms, and something that we should think about.
We always have gaps to do anything. We always have knowledge gaps. We always have information gap, communications and informations. We always have policy gap. And the last gap is action gap. We have to make sure that everyone are on board. We try to introduce, these water, energies, and food nexus, to the whole world, to the society. And therefore, everyone, have to be on board. Academic institution have to make sure that we have enough knowledge, to continue. We have to have those information and communication. As someone said, we need holistic point of view. We're talking about the integrations. And therefore, we need, those kind of things. The third thing is, okay, we all agree, based on this common and differentiated responsibility, we are on board. And we agree that we have to collectively do something together. By Ostrom, the great political science, the Ostrom collective action theories, to attain the highest possible net benefit from collective action, we have to trust each other. ASEAN in transitions. Do we trust China, India, USA? And when it comes down to the local Mekong Basin countries, the 4 countries, do we trust each other? Do the Laos, PDR, Vietnam, and Cambodia trust Thailand? And then, that's the really challenging. And the third thing is, when we're talking about how to move forward, from this policy in principle into policy in practice about these water, energy, food securities. I have 3 or 4 points. The first thing is, I mean, we have to finish unfinished agenda of the MDG in this region. We have unfinished agenda, especially poverty. And that's the foremost. Before we introduce something, I mean, we have to make sure that we finish whatever that we left behind. The second point is, I mean, we have to bridge this human divider in our society, in our region. What are those divided? Environment and natural resources. We have to share those environment and natural resources management together. We have to make sure that quality of life are equal.
First question is that nexus of water, food, and energy. This word nexus, which has become very important in defining a global research agenda and also policy agenda in the higher level in different places. Is there anything new? I think the basic issue is related to power. Is this new way of framing empowering or disempowering? And so how can we see different issues of power? Not only power to control, not only power to order, command, but power to think and power to relate. I think here the issue may come back to not only power in the definitional challenge, but also the issue of power that we all can see how we can come together beyond our often seen each other by national borders, and also different professions. Tanchirakorn mentioned that it comes back to university, come back to research circles, that we have to see how can we also make sense together with other actors in the world, out there. And in that sense, opening up a university for a more flexible approach to knowledge and innovation, critically, but also creatively